the need for a strong economy. 2, responding to Brexit and a changing world. 3, tackling enduring social divisions. 4, responding to an ageing society. And 5, facing up to fast-changing technology.
So what's in the Tory manifesto? Well, Brexit, of course, is pretty important. We're going to exit the European Single Market and Customs Union and have a deep special partnership instead. We are going to stay part of some European programmes, and it may be reasonable for us to continue making some contributions. We're going to remain signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights for at least the next Parliament. I don't think on Brexit any particular thrills or spills or anything we hadn't seen before. On the economy, on government spending and borrowing, there's going to be a balanced budget by the middle of the next decade, we're told. On immigration, which of course has been in many ways the dominant issue in British politics for the last few years, guess what? They aim to reduce annual net migration to tens of thousands. But the issue that I think is causing most debate is what Theresa May calls the social care revolution. So how will this work in future? Well, people with assets, people with property, people with savings will have the first £100,000 of that absolutely protected. Previously, that figure was only about £25,000. So the good news for the elderly who've got savings is that actually a little bit more of your money, on the face of it, is going to be protected. That's the good news. The bad news for the elderly is that actually if you're receiving care at home, whether it's a district nurse or wherever it may be, you will then be expected to pay towards that. So you're not just going to be expected to pay money if you go into an old people's home, but you'll be expected to pay money for care at home. And I guess this has caused, from what I can see, and certainly Ian Dale's programme had a record number of phone calls this evening, the most they've had all year. This seems to be the one that is causing, the biggest issue. But it is definitely a different-looking Conservative Party. I think any comparisons between Margaret Thatcher and Theresa May would have died today. She's taken the party in many ways, economically, much more to the centre. And certainly giving the impression, for example, there's no guarantee that taxes won't go up for high earners, no guarantee at all. So it is probably the traditional Tory right that are feeling nervous about it. So it is a different approach. And really what I'm asking you tonight is, do you like the new approach of the Conservative Party? Is it enough to clinch your vote? And if you think, wow, I don't recognise this lot, they're brand new, it's terribly exciting, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Or if you think, no, please, I want to go back to the days of Thatcher, I can't bear it, well, then you can text me on 84850, or perhaps you think it's just the same old Tories dressed up in a different style. And then you can tweet using the hashtag Farage on LBC, at LBC. You can, of course, watch the show live on Facebook. Has this manifesto launched today of the Conservatives been a success? It's a new look, it's a new style. Does it convince you? Craig in York, are you, and Yorkshire, of course, was where she launched this manifesto today. Are you convinced, Craig?
I'm not, Nigel. To echo kind of what you said earlier, for me, as a kind of a classical liberal, if you like, or a neoliberal,
yes.
as they fashion themselves as classical liberals, obviously, it seems to me to be alert to the left. What Conservative Party would introduce? Death taxes, price fixing in the labour market and in the energy market, threats of other tax rises, protectionist policies, British jobs for British workers, that slogan.
Yes, and just to pick up there, Craig, so if you employ somebody from outside the European Union, the employer will have to pay £2,000 a year for the privilege of employing a skilled worker from somewhere else in the world, which has surprised people, Craig, has it not?
Well, precisely. The EU is a protectionist racket, and it appears to me that the Conservatives, pandering to some of the popularity of Mr Corbyn, are lurching to the left along with him, which, of course, for me, Corbyn's even further left, so I'll still have to vote Conservative. But it is a disappointment to me that perhaps the economically liberal part of politics in Britain has completely vaporised.
Yes, I have to say, I think it's 5.2 million now people in this country who are small business owners or sole traders, and for them, there isn't really much good news here at all, is there?
No, I don't think there is. It's a great shame. I mean, I know Germany's still got a kind of a liberal, economically liberal part of their politics, but it's a shame that we don't anymore. I think Conservative MEPs, for example, Daniel Hannan, quite traditional on the economic liberal side of things, and I think he, in particular, has been quite quiet on the Conservative manifesto.
Yeah,
probably for good reason.
I mean, Craig, are you normally a Conservative voter?
Well, I'm actually only 22, so I'm a strange kind of a millennial because, of course, most of my generation will be voting for Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
So to say that I'm a usual Conservative voter wouldn't be quite true because I haven't voted in many general elections at all. But when I have voted, it's either been for the Conservatives or in fact for UKIP when it was a European issue. Yeah.
So are you left confused, Craig?
Frankly, yeah. I mean, I enjoy politics, I enjoy economics. But what I've read about what the right should be in economics, and really what I subscribe to, is not what the Conservatives are currently standing for.
So it's too much big state, Craig. It's too much, as you say, price setting, fixing, slightly protectionist. Anything good in it, Craig? Go on, try.
Try. I think some of the towards Brexit, I think Theresa May will be better on Brexit than Jeremy Corbyn would be. There's some stability in that. I think that she set out a plan which I imagine has actually been rather influenced by yourself, which she, if she pursues it, would be good in terms of getting a positive outcome and one that's clear in anticipation, clear in aim, unlike, I imagine, what Jeremy Corbyn would have, because he's clearly very split on the issue. He campaigned against the EU for all his life and been forced to campaign and remain because of his position as leader of the party. So.
No, there was quite a lot here, Craig, that I recognised from the manifesto launch that I did in 2015 when I was leading UKIP. I mean, bringing back grammar schools, scrapping the tolls on the Severn Bridge, and even talking about Brussels bureaucrats. So they've gone down a very UKIP-y route on that stuff. Plus, of course, the pledge, and we'll discuss that later in the programme, to reduce immigration to tens of thousands. And what they've done, Craig, here is they want to sound like UKIP on that stuff, and on the economic stuff, they're actually going directly for the Labour vote. So they're trying to go for both those groups of voters, whilst at the same time, on the social care costs, which I guess we'll come to in a minute, I think they're assuming, Craig, that the pensioners are just going to vote for them anyway.
And despite there's all the social care costs, the welfare costs, everything goes up anyway. So for me, in summary, I think it's, as you say, increase in the size of the state, increase in public expenditure. The government already spends 40% of our national income. Isn't that too much already?
Craig, you are a classical Liberal. I thank you very much for your call. And I go to Hazel in Sandhurst next. Hazel, good evening. What do you make of the New Look Tory party?
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
Great to talk to you. Love the show. And my only complaint is that you're only on for an hour.
Ah. Right. Well. That aside, Hazel, what do you make of this manifesto?
Well, I was going to vote Tory only because of the Brexit.
Yes.
I'm really a UKIPper.
Yes.
And that's where my heart lies. Mm-hmm. I definitely won't be voting for Theresa May now. I think she shot herself in the foot.
Yeah.
The social care package for me. I was born in the 50s. And I lived in a two-bed council house with my 6 sisters and my parents. I slept in a cot till I was 5. Times were hard, and I've worked hard all my life. I now own my own home, which I hope to pass on to my daughter and grandchildren. And with this plan that she's got now, I think, well, I don't know what's going to happen to me, and it sounds like the government are just taxing me for being ill and then dying, basically.
Does it? I mean, does this really feel like a death tax to you, Hazel? Is that what you think?
Yes, it does, very much, yeah.
I guess the counter-argument, Hazel, is that we still have a deficit running at just over £50 billion a year. If you're listening, Shadow Chancellor McDonnell, that's what it is. And I guess the argument is, Hazel, we have an ageing population. How on earth else can we possibly pay for the care of an ageing society? That's the argument they'll put.
Well, why are we Or why are the Tories so hell-bent on paying so much foreign aid?
Well, now that's interesting, because one of the things that was very clear in the manifesto is she is maintaining David Cameron's proudest achievement, namely that we spend more on foreign aid than any other Western country in the world,
yes.
and it will stay at 0.7% of
Which
GDP.
I'm livid about.
Which you're livid about. Right, so you would say, cut foreign aid. I've no doubt you'd say, stop giving money to the EU.
Definitely, I was a Brexiter, a very proud one as well.
And then we could be a little bit kinder to people like you, who've come from relatively modest backgrounds and now own your own home. So, Hazel, you're very angry about this. So, I mean, has Theresa May actually lost your vote today?
Yes, definitely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very
And
interesting.
Because in the area that I live, it will definitely be Tory, I should think, that will get in. And, so really I've got a wasted vote, but I'm going to go with my heart and vote UKIP.
Right, OK. Hazel, thank you very much. Well, we've had a couple of long extended phone calls and both people really unhappy. One, a young Thatcherite, basically, that wanted to see more free market, less big state, and Hazel saying she's worked damned hard all her life, and what she worries about now is long-term care. Even living in her own home could see much of her savings disappear. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. So the Tory manifesto was launched today by Theresa May up in Halifax, and it is definitely a very different look to the Conservative Party. Very much more control of things by the state, including pricing of energy and things like that. And for Thatcherites, they're dismayed, but she says that this is a manifesto for mainstream Britain. So she's putting herself in economic terms very much at the centre, but very, very UKIP-y on immigration and Europe. And that's pretty much where we are. So who wrote the manifesto? This is interesting. Ben Gummer was in charge of writing the manifesto, and he's been a Conservative MP in Suffolk for some years. He was last year in the referendum a fanatical pro-Remainer. And the morning after Brexit, he wrote, "I'm feeling sick to the pit of my stomach about the impact this will have on jobs across the country." And here, 11 months later, he is now the author of a pro-Brexit manifesto. Isn't career politics a wonderful, wonderful thing? And your messages coming in. I'm sorry, but social care in old age was never part of the welfare state. If you have the money, you can pay for your own care, and if you have less than £100,000, then it's free. Sounds pretty fair to me, says David Addlestone. OK, there is a strong counterpoint of view. Hazel, before the break, said she worked hard all her life. She owns her own property. She wants to leave it to her children. After all of your anti-May calls, I will still be voting May, despite being a long-term Labour supporter. That comes from Bristol. And from Southampton, Kathy says, I'm going to vote Conservative because she's promised Brexit and she's the right one to take us forward. And on Twitter, Billy says to me, Theresa May lost my vote today. Work hard and pay for your care. Scrounge all your life and it's all free. So it is social care costs that are bringing out much of the emotion on this. I wonder what Kumar in Ealing has to say about this manifesto and the New Look Tory party.
Yes, good evening, sir. Somebody once said it's the economy stupid that all elections are won or lost on. And in that regard, I'd like to make three brief points. One on the public finances, secondly on the triple lock, and the third on social care.
It's all yours. It's all yours. It's all yours. The LBC airwaves are yours, Kumar.
OK. Between 2010 and 2016, George Osborne borrowed more than all previous governments in the history of Parliament over 350 years.
Yes.
Doesn't anybody point that out? I know you pointed out, but you don't describe it with the significance that it's due, number one.
Well, Kumar, I did try in the leaders' debate in 2015 when I was head-to-head with Cameron. I said for all your claims to be responsible, you have doubled the national debt in the space of 5 years. But nobody picked it up or debated it.
Can I respond? And not only that, not in one single year did Osborne meet his financial targets. Number two, he promised to balance the budget by the end of the Parliament. He failed. So why should we trust the Tories now? Well,
Cuba, and again, let's get the facts right here. In 2010, they promised we would have a balanced budget in the financial year 2014-15, and we didn't. And now they're promising us that it'll be balanced by 2025. And I'm not sure I believe them, Kumar.
Precisely. And but my question is that given that you and Alex Hammond are probably the two most distinguished politicians in the last 25 years, why haven't you brought this to bear on the Tory Parliament?
Kumar, as I say, I did my absolute best in those leaders' debates back in 2015. It was very difficult because all the other parties were saying... they were all saying austerity, 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 as if the Tories had cut everything. And I kept saying, no, we're not living in austerity. We are still living way beyond our means. And I tried like crazy to get a proper debate going on this. And I'm afraid Osborne and Cameron won the election by the press telling everybody that actually they were running a very responsible budget, and they're just not. So I've tried, and right at the moment, just for some reason, people simply aren't interested. I mean, I would say this, that given, and you are quite right, it's a remarkable way of putting it, isn't it, that Osborne borrowed more than governments had done for the previous 250 years.
That's all you need to say.
Yeah.
That's all you need to say.
Yeah, okay. Well, if I go back into frontline politics, Kumar, I'll take you on as a spin doctor, okay? Because you're very, very good at this.
Okay. A second point I'd like to make about the double or triple lock, okay?
Yes.
Some 30 years ago, in the 80s, okay, there were roughly 15 people in work providing the taxes to provide the pensions for every pensioner. It was about 1 million in those days. Today, that 15 is now down to 5, and the number of pensioners is from 1 up to about 5 million. In 10 years' time, the baby boomers who in the 80s were joining the workforce, they're going to be retiring. So we're going to have a 3-to-1 ratio. So you've got basically 4 alternatives. Either you increase the taxes on the 3, or you reduce the benefits of the 1. Alternatively, you have to have an immigration policy, which clearly you don't have in UKIP, but what one would have thought that you increase the 3 to 5, and by the grace of God, I've welcomed these 4 million immigrants we've had over the last 20 years.
Well, Kumar, hang on. I mean, we can, of course. I mean, there is an argument that says that the way you deal with an ageing population is through mass immigration. I've heard that argument many, many times before. There is one slight problem with it, and that is that immigrants get old too, don't they?
Mr. Farrow, not mass, but balanced immigration. I'm not calling for mass immigration.
Okay.
I'm calling for balanced immigration. You've got to. Why do you think Merkel has allowed 1 million immigrants in? Because they're mostly young, they're mostly men, and they're going to work, and they're going to provide the pension. Because that ratio of 3-to-1 in Germany, that's coming to 1-to-1.
But let's, Kumar, and we could talk all night. Let's get back to this manifesto and your criticisms of it.
Third point, social care. She's totally flopped on that. And I think it's disgusting because I consider myself middle class, and yet she squeezed the middle class. Osborne says we're all in it together. Hell, we are. Forgive my language. I once worked for a Tory cabinet minister, and he said there are 4 types of Tories. There are landed gentry Tories, business Tories, economic Tories, and One Nation Tories. I do believe, actually, that May and John Major are One Nation Tories. But my point is this. What are we going to do about our ageing population? Because they deserve better.
No. You raise a very, very good point. And there is, and you're one of them. You use the word disgusting. There is quite a bit of disgust out there, I think. Kumar, does this make you less inclined to go and vote Conservative on June the 8th?
I would never... Look, I'm a capitalist by instinct.
Yes.
I'm a socialist by conscience. So I like to make money, but I also believe in paying taxes. But can I ask a final question of you, sir?
Go on.
Okay. Given that you're one of the few turkeys that have voted for Christmas...
Yes.
And post-Brexit, what are you going to do wake up Boxing Day?
Well, you may have seen I was busy yesterday in the European Parliament with Mr Juncker, and I want to oversee the Brexit process as much as I can because the action is all going to be in Brussels. It's not going to be in Westminster. And my view, Kumar, if you're asking me, is that I spent 25 years fighting to get this referendum. We won this referendum. If Mrs May delivers Brexit, I will be happy that my career in frontline politics is finished. If Mrs May delivers a fudged or half Brexit, then I would have to put myself back into the front lines. Kumar, thank you for your very good, interesting and informative call. Luke in Ascot, how do you feel about this manifesto, Luke?
I feel that it's a true manifesto. A lot of people are annoyed about it, but people usually only get annoyed when they're faced with facts, as you probably know with your career in politics. But I just wanted to raise my point that you made about the borrowing of the UK government. In fact, although you're looking at it as a numbers point of view, yes, numbers-wise, we've borrowed more than any other government previously. In percentage of GDP, it's one of the lowest. It's actually only about 3.5% of GDP. So when the economy and GDP is growing, obviously you can borrow more money, and that's why it looks more and worse than it is, when actually it's not as big as Labour has had before. So, for example,
Labour, yes. I mean, OK, Labour's got out of control, but that was because we bailed out the banks, wasn't it?
No, even back in the 70s, so for example, when Callaghan was in office, he borrowed 7% of GDP, or even, I know it was post-war, but we borrowed 15% of GDP. What I'm saying is people look at numbers rather than the actual...
Luke, I understand what you're saying, but here's the real point. If you promise in your 2010 manifesto that by the end of that Parliament there will not be an annual deficit, and if you then make the same promise again in 2015, and you've made in the first 2 years very little progress towards it, is it actually credible in the third manifesto to say in a few years' time we will have eliminated the deficit? That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, no, it's not, and the same with the immigration. I'll believe it when I see it. And just to make a point that I'm actually a member of the Labour Party. I paid to be a member of the Labour Party, and my original point was that even though I'm a paying member, I will vote for Conservatives because I cannot have Jeremy Corbyn as leader.
Right, so you're voting, so you're a paid-up Labour member, but Corbyn is not right to be Prime Minister in your view?
He can't be. I think we're going to get through Brexit, vote Tories in this time, and then after Jeremy Corbyn resigns, which he will have to surely at the end of the election loss, then hopefully we'll get a credible leader, and I'll be able to...
OK, fine. Luke, very interesting. I'm fascinated to hear all your opinions on this, whether you're a traditional Tory who feels upset. Maybe this manifesto is switching you from Labour to the Conservatives. I don't know. On Facebook, John says, not happy with the Tory manifesto, but it has to be the tough route, and to vote Tory to kill off the Labour Socialist Party. Craig says the Tory manifesto is vaguely better than the Lib Dem offering and just ahead of Labour. Doesn't sound like Craig's too enthused with this general election so far. And Helena says, stop using older people to get money out of them. It's just not on. On Twitter, Tories ought to be a little concerned about the reaction on LBC to their manifesto pledges on charges to pensioners. That's what Moses says. Well, Moses, maybe the calculation is this, that they actually do have to get the deficit down somehow, and that wealthier pensioners who've got property, assets, savings of over £100,000, or perhaps a lot more than £100,000, they may have calculated, do you know what? They're going to vote for us anyway. They're going to vote for us anyway. So why don't we use this manifesto economically to go for Labour voters, and in terms of Brexit to go for UKIP voters? And that, I think, must be the calculation. That's my view. You're listening to a Nigel Farage show exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. Well, one by one, we're going through each party's manifesto as they are launched. Immigration has been a massive issue in British politics over the course of the last few years. And if you remember, in 2010, David Cameron pledged that the Conservative government would reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year. They repeated the pledge in 2015, and it was rumoured that they were going to repeat that pledge in this general election. Yesterday, there was a quite astonishing intervention to really try and get her to change her mind. And it came from George Osborne. Remember him? The one that resigned after Brexit. He was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, now the editor of the Evening Standard. And he launched a really scathing, I think, attempt to get her to change policy. He said it remains a mystery why the Prime Minister is going to recommit her party to reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year. She does not need to do this. It is politically rash. It is economically illiterate, and she was not the author of this pledge. David Cameron made it in opposition. And he went on to say that in private, the members of Cameron's cabinet didn't believe in it and never thought it would happen. Well, despite Mr. Osborne's attempt, she has recommitted a Conservative government to aim to reduce the annual net figure on migration to tens of thousands. I won't say anything on that, but I will ask you to ring in. Do you believe them? Back to the callers. Claire in Richmond. How do you view this manifesto, Claire?
Hello, Nigel.
Hi.
First and foremost, I don't believe the Tories. I don't believe their manifesto. I was going to vote Tory purely on the referendum for Brexit, and I felt that she would be the best person to take us into negotiations with the EU. But I looking at their, as you say, their general elections in their previous ones, it's just continuous lies. So, and the thing about immigration is the reason I'm ringing really is because of the social care aspect.
Yes.
Immigration does come into it. My mother, in the last year, has become very, very ill. My parents own their own home. My dad worked till he was 73. He was a plasterer. He didn't sit in an office. He did a physical job. My mother started out as a nurse. She ended up in social care, and she worked her whole life. They were encouraged by Margaret Thatcher's department to, buy their council houses, which they did.
As
my
many
mother
did.
didn't want to do that, but my father did. He wanted to, because they were encouraged to leave something for their children, because their parents left them nothing, because they were absolutely desperately poor. There wasn't anything to live. You couldn't own your own home. You rented, and that's what you did.
Uh-huh.
So my parents have absolutely... My dad didn't give up work till he was 73.
Right, so they own their own home.
Yeah.
And you fear that what's going to happen...
Well, she has care. So in the last year, she's become very, very ill. And she's been stuck in hospital. I also worked in social care. I kind of know all the ins and outs of how it works. And, and I'm not going to say who I worked for, but, I managed to get her out and get her home. They have their own home, but they have no savings. So they're not wealthy, but they ploughed all their money into having this property. And I would say they just about managed to pay their bills every single month. They will be means tested, and on that means test, they will get the winter fuel allowance. So they're not rich by any shape or form.
But
so she's having...
But they have a property asset, yeah?
They do have a property asset. I've spoken to my mother today, and even she agrees that there should be a contribution to care. Absolutely, because people are living longer. I've got an intelligent parents. They're not stupid. The point is that all of her carers are foreign. Every single one of them. There isn't one English carer coming through the door. And I will hand on heart tell you they are wonderful girls that come through that door. But I know how much her bill is because I've seen it. My mother doesn't have to contribute at the moment, but I know how much that bill is because it's about 700 quid a month.
Yep.
That's what it is.
Yep.
The point is they're there for 15 minutes each time they come. They're supposed to be there an hour, but they're there. But we don't complain because we don't pay for that. However, if my mother was having to pay for that and it had to come out of
then you change the relationship, don't you, with the carer in quite a big way? Yeah.
You do, because at that point we would then be saying, well, actually, we are paying you for 1 hour of work, which is clearly what she was assessed to have right at the beginning when she came home and she was assessed. So, that money isn't going to go very far.
So, Claire, what
would... on about 9 quid an hour.
What would your mother consider to be a fair contribution?
Well, I've spoken to her today and she has said, if Conservatives get in, then they will have to do what the Conservatives say. However, I'm doing a postal vote for them, and I have encouraged my parents today not to vote for Conservatives.
Right.
I think it's disgusting. My mum gave her life. She is crippled today.
Claire.
And all her health problems are because of the job that she did all them years. There was no hoisting, there was no equipment.
Claire, I
How
understand.
I see it.
Claire from Richmond, I understand the passion, and you put your case about your parents' situation very, very clearly. I thank you. Caroline in Epping, how do you feel about the social care costs that could be imposed upon people?
Well, I'm quite nervous about the call anyway, but also I think I'm not going to be very popular because I actually don't find it so troublesome. I don't find that the direction that she's taken us in is the wrong one.
Okay.
A couple of points. On the international assistance, I think that we have a duty in the world. We view ourselves in Britain as good, generous people, and I know a lot of good, generous people, and we need to be out there leading the world in showing commitment for what really are third world problems. You know, we have a lot of problems here, but there are people starving.
So you're perfectly comfortable with the foreign aid budget and us being the biggest contributor from any country in the West?
I think we are staying by our commitments that we made, and we're recognised for that. And I think what people don't understand is that there's probably a lot of goodwill and probably business and a lot of other things that are coming to us because of our involvement in other countries. However, having said all that, I don't believe it's well controlled. I don't believe it's going in the right direction to the right people. I think, having spoken to a lot of people that I know, they do not have a problem with giving 0.07% or whatever it is of our contribution if it was going to the right places.
But isn't it also, Caroline,
aid for development?
It's an arbitrary target. So you get these ridiculous stories where with a month to go, they've got to spend more money. Otherwise, it's not going to reach 0.7%.
No, I do understand it's an arbitrary target. I'm not saying that the whole thing doesn't need to be looked at, and that's a case for another show, I think, in its own. But that's just one point I'd like to make. That I do think we need to be. We have not done great things in the world in the last 20 years. I think we should be making a contribution towards reversing some of that.
Okay.
My other point is I don't understand why means testing for the wealthy is not a good idea. When I worked in the city, I was getting child benefit. I didn't need it. I tried to give it back. I couldn't. I don't understand why people earning over a certain amount, the millionaires need the winter allowance. What I am concerned about is that the whole ethos of the party, and what she said today was, if you are healthy, if you have a modicum of intelligence, if you are blessed with good health, you should be contributing. You should not expect benefits. They are a privilege. You should be contributing to help those that genuinely need the help. And to do that, we need to be looking at things like means testing. Why all children are getting meals, I don't know. I can give my child a lunch for £1, for £2. I'm on benefits myself. I don't begrudge that, okay? Because there are other people who don't.
Yeah, I mean, your point, Caroline, is that if a benefit is universal, if everybody gets it, it's not really a benefit, is it? So
it should. Okay. And I've heard a lot of people today coming on saying, I should get this, I should get that. I've not heard anybody coming on saying, what can I do for the UK? What can I do for my community? What can I contribute? I'm well. I've been blessed with intelligence. I have a good job. I've worked all my life. I inherited nothing. I inherited no house. I've raised my children. I've raised my children in the expectation that they will be able to look after themselves and given them what I hope is a good education. I don't expect them to survive off me passing them the house.
No, but a lot of people, Caroline, a lot of people do feel strongly about that, don't they? A lot of people say...
Please don't misunderstand me. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. You were just asking for people's opinion.
Yeah.
My opinion is you should work hard, but life is cruel. Okay, people were comparing why not cancer, why dementia. You cannot legislate for every disease. You cannot legislate for that. If I can take out insurance for heart attacks and other things, I do that. Okay, right. I do that for my children. I try and take care of the things I can take care of. Pensions, I speak to so many people who have no pension. Okay, now I put away, thank God, because of the work that I was in, which was in the city, I put away my pension from day one. Therefore, I do have some comfort. But if I'm sick, then I expect to pay for what life's thrown at me. I don't expect some stranger that I don't know to pick up my tab.
No.
So what I'm trying to say is, I just would like to hear a bit more from people.
So you're really saying, Caroline, that you're saying that we should think a bit more about what we can do for our country rather than what our country can do for us.
Absolutely.
Get it? No. You made that point very, very clearly and very well, and I thank you. It is the family's responsibility to look after their elderly, not the government's or the state's, says Luciano from Bath. Theresa May has just lost my vote after her policies against pensioners, says Carol in Poole. Hi, Nigel. Can people stop wittering about what the Conservatives did not deliver from their 2010 manifesto? No party ever delivers on their manifestos. Well, that may be true, but it is interesting, isn't it, that when you make the same promise in a third manifesto, I think people have a right to start to begin to ask a question of whether they actually believe it. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45. You still have a chance to register for tickets for my roadshow at lbc.co.uk. I'll be live next week. On Monday, I'll be in Manchester. Tuesday, I'll be in Birmingham. Wednesday in Newcastle. And Thursday in Glasgow. And you can be part of that discussion. That's the Nigel Farage Roadshow, all next week, only on LBC, lbc.co.uk, if you want to come and join those studio audiences. So it's the big launch of a Tory manifesto. It's a very different look, Tory party. It's a new approach. Have they got it right? Have they secured your vote? Sebastian in Barnes, how do you feel about it?
Well, I think this marks kind of a break from the kind of solid good conservative inclusion they're coming out today, saying that's what her manifesto represents. In fact, I think it represents interventionism. I think it represents. When we first saw that with the energy, the
yes.
to put a cap on those energy prices, I thought that was a mistake. I think the way you encourage those prices to come down to competition. I am a paid Conservative member, and do I have it?
Sebastian, that phone line is absolutely rubbish. We're going to come back to you. I'm going to go to Joe in Manchester. Joe, are you impressed with this Tory manifesto?
I'm impressed how evil some people can be.
Evil?
Yeah, I think it is evil. I mean, maybe I'm talking from a personal perspective. My dad has had dementia for a while, but I find it absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I know it's a one-off case, but the Duke of Westminster is avoiding £4.6 billion in inheritance tax, but the social care budget has been slashed by £4.6 billion. And the NHS deficit is, what, £2.3 billion?
Well, I mean, Joe, if we talk about money, that has been spent on public services over the last, since 2010, since Cameron became Prime Minister, I mean, they haven't exactly been slashing and burning, have they?
Well, I mean, 700 billion borrowed, is it?
They borrowed a lot of money, yeah, they really have. They really have.
I mean, maybe I'm sidetracking, but how come there's issues with the Labour Party finding 50 billion, but 700 billion...
Well, do you know what, Joe? Joe, you've just put your finger on it. One of the biggest nonsenses in this whole election campaign, Joe, is parties make promises and they're asked, how are you going to pay for it? And they say a penny on this or whatever, when actually, no one's balanced the books for goodness knows how long anyway. So I think you're absolutely right about that. How do you feel about, better off pensioners making a contribution, even if they're treated at home?
Well, I mean, define better off. I mean...
Well, they have done. They have done. They've said if you're worth £100,000, if you've got property value or savings worth more than £100,000, you've got to start paying a contribution.
Okay, well, I live in Manchester, and the average house price is around 120,000 for a two-bedroom terrace.
Yes.
So that is, I'm assuming, over 80% of all homeowners. What is the point in having a home?
Well, there is an argument, Joe, and somebody else made it earlier on text. There is an argument that if this is what's going to happen to you, what's the point of saving at all? Because if you're worth less than £100,000, the state will pick up the tab. I mean, it is actually potentially quite a big disincentive for people to save and buy their own homes.
Oh, exactly. I mean, just to go back to the dementia issue, my mother is my father's carer, and that has allowed me to go to university without knowing that she would be on the breadline. She'd be in poverty. She wouldn't know where the next meal is coming from, so to speak. So that's allowed me to, I feel, get a proper career. I'll be able to contribute back to the system.
Yeah. No, I get that. And by the way, Joe, on health, they are saying that they're going to increase spending on the NHS by £8 billion in real terms over the next 5 years, OK? And I do wonder sometimes whether we don't perhaps get to the heart of this problem, and that is that our population is going up by 500,000 people every year. It's a lot more healthcare, Joe, we have to provide, isn't it?
Well, it is, but when people talk about having good British values, wasn't the NHS... I don't think the NHS had a sort of subordinate clause in it saying, well, that's assuming we can look after them. We've got enough money for wars, we've got enough money to bail out the banks. Why don't we have enough money to pay for people who have contributed all their life?
Joe, it's a very strong point. You've made it very well, and I thank you. Anthony says on Facebook, manifestos are best filed under fiction. Lucinda says, so some Brexit supporters aren't going to vote Tory now because of a social care policy and don't mind risking leaving the Brexit negotiations in Jeremy Corbyn's hands. Jackie says, too many people think other people's taxes should keep them while they sit at home doing nothing. Nigel, my pension is £10,000 per year. I can't get any extra benefits, and it simply isn't enough to live on. I am not a rich pensioner, and I've paid national insurance for the last 44 years. And that, I think, is the general flavour we're getting from older people who are contacting this show. They feel that what's happened today is going to rob them of many, many years of hard work and thrift and saving. If you disagree with that, let me know. And I know some people say, well, actually, isn't it fair enough? Because how can we, with an ageing population, how can we pay for everything? Sebastian in Barnes, you're back, I hope, with a phone line that works.
Yes, hopefully.
So the last bit I got was you're a paid-up Tory member.
Yes, that's correct.
Right, but you're not happy with this manifesto.
No, I mean, we first saw this kind of break from free market belief. We saw that with the energy price cap, that pledge there. And I think that was a really, really bad idea. I also think the decision to, fine these companies £2,000 wherever, the workers that they hire from abroad, I also think that's a really bad decision. I believe that because I think that it restricts businesses' employment pools and skills pools. And I think
I mean, the idea, Sebastian, I mean, the whole argument, those of us that have really pushed the immigration argument hard, and no one's pushed it harder than me, the whole argument is it's not about stopping skilled workers coming in from the rest of the world. It was about the unlimited supply of unskilled labour coming in from the European Union.
Well, yeah, that's a very fair point, but why then is the Conservative Party pushing this as part of their manifesto?
I don't know.
Anti-business.
I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. It seems to me, Sebastian, and I'm going to put it to you as a Tory party member, it seems to me that if you're one of the 5.2 million small businesses or sole traders in this country, this manifesto offers you very little at all.
Well, I think actually, I mean, look, yes, that is true. I think the manifesto itself does a very great disservice to small businesses. But I will stick with that point, that I think it is not the government's responsibility to tell businesses whom they can employ, what kind of pools they can employ from. Yep. I think that's not the government's duty. I think the government should stay out of businesses' decisions in terms of their employment. I think there is an argument to be said that, yes, there are people that come to this country that abuse our services, but I don't think that's reflective of the overwhelming majority of people who do come. And if we want to promote that, and if we want to say, look, we're on your side, then why are we telling businesses, we're going to put a fine on you for hiring workers from abroad? I think that's the most stupid idea I've ever heard, really, on that kind of topic.
Well, this is really damning stuff coming from a paid-up Conservative Party member. I mean, I assume, Sebastian, you're still voting Conservative, or does this all sort of make you want to abstain?
Well, no, I will vote Conservative. I think if you compare it with Jeremy Corbyn, I think his policies, I think it's terrible. And I am a very strong Conservative. I will always vote for the Conservative Party. I think there are parts of Theresa May's policies that I agree with, but I think there are parts of it that I really strongly disagree with.
Sebastian, I'm going to have to stop you because time is moving on. I've got to get some more callers in. So a disenchanted Conservative, Sebastian, still going to vote Conservative, but doesn't like the move away from free market capitalism. David in Wrexham, how do you feel?
Hi.
Good evening.
Well, I feel quite angry actually because, to be honest, I grew up in Wales. I was born in '62 in that, so it was kind of quite a poverty upbringing. I was the first one in the family to go to university. I met my wife, and we've worked basically 6 days every week, all of our married life, putting money away. We've managed to get together a house of 300,000, which is our legacy to our kids. We thought invest in bricks and mortar. Yep. And basically what's going to happen is we're having the rug pulled from under us. How do I tell my kids that you work hard all your life, and in the old days they said you work hard, you get somewhere, and you get a bit of money in your property. My kids now will look and they'll think, well, what's the point?
Why bother saving? Why bother being thrifty? Why not spend it all down the pub, and then later on the state picks up the tab? By the way, that wasn't an advert to everybody. David, are you less inclined to vote Conservative right now?
Put it this way: if you were standing now, I'd be like many millions of people. I'd be voting for you. I've got to carefully think about this. Corbyn is a non-entity. Theresa May now is her halo is dropped.
David, I'm going to have to let you go and leave you to this complicated decision. And my last message of the evening is, good evening, Nigel. The Tory pledges are well thought out and will work. People want something for nothing, says Ashley in Beaconsfield. Well, judging by the calls, the texts, the tweets, I would say from LBC listeners, it's not been a great day for the Conservative Party, though perhaps in some ways a brave one. It just on the economics doesn't feel like the Conservative Party that I've known all my life. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back on Monday at 7, live from Manchester, on The Road Show. Coming up at 10, it's Majid Nawaz. Up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you, and we're going to continue this conversation. Massive reaction on the phones into LBC on this issue.